Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello friends, I welcome you all to this first lecture of BSc with Chemistry, discipline specific elective of Quantum Chemistry, Spectroscopy and Photochemistry. I am Dr. Vijay Tangade, working as Assistant Professor at Postgraduate Teaching Department of Chemistry of Rashtrasant Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University in Nagpur. Friends, my lecture will go through following topics. First, we will see a brief about the history of quantum mechanics, then postulates of quantum mechanics, followed by quantization of energy levels, which will include zero-point energy and Heisenberg uncertainty principle, quantum mechanical operators, algebra of operations, wave functions, probability distribution, Schrodinger equation and its application to one particle in a box and then three-dimensional box and their variable and degeneracy. Friends, do you remember Newton's law of motion? First law says, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Second law says, force equals mass time acceleration. Third law says, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now, why do we need to see these laws? Because these laws are the origin of classical mechanics. And actually, if we see, the real development of science started because we started understanding the mechanics of a macroscopic things. Although we say classical mechanics is a fundamental of all real sciences, however, this classical mechanics can be applied only to macroscopic particles, as the position as well as momentum can be predicted accurately for these particles. However, this is not possible in case of microscopic particles. According to Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it is impossible to determine the position as well as velocity of a microscopic particle accurately. Classical mechanics assumes that the energy is absorbed or emitted in a continuous manner. But according to Planck's theory, the transition of energy is in the form of packets called as quanta. There are several important phenomena which could not be explained on the basis of classical mechanics. We will see one by one all of them. So, what are the limitations to classical mechanics? Classical mechanics could not explain several experimental phenomena. If we see the black body radiation, the body which absorbs the entire radiations incident on it, it is called as perfectly black body. Perfectly black body is not only a good absorber of radiation, but is also a good emitter of radiations. This energy emitted by a black body does not consist of a single wavelength, but it is uniformly distributed along a spectrum at different temperatures. At a particular temperature, the energy corresponding to all wavelengths is not equal. With increase in temperature, the total energy emitted increases and wavelength decreases. Wien, through his displacement law, and Rayleigh and Jeans also tried to explain through classical mechanics the spectrum of black body radiation, but they failed. It was convincingly described by Max Planck using quantum theory. If you see the photoelectric effect of Albert Einstein, it says, when a beam of light of sufficiently high frequency is allowed to strike a metal surface, electrons are ejected from the metal surface. This phenomena is called as photoelectric effect. According to classical mechanics, the energy of light depends upon intensity and not on the frequency. Hence, if light of sufficiently high intensity is allowed to incident on the metal, electrons should have emitted irrespective of the frequency of light. But this is not the case. Hence, classical mechanics fails to explain these properties of photoelectric effect. Moreover, if you see towards the heat capacities of solid, the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of solid through 10 degrees of centigrade is called as heat capacity of that solid. Dulong and Petit found that for all the monoatomic solids, the molar heat capacity is same with value of about 25 joules per Kelvin per mole. According to classical mechanics, the observed value of heat capacity of solids can be measured accurately. However, this is not true at lower temperature, especially when temperature approaches towards absolute zero. The value is much lower than 3R if you approach towards absolute zero of temperature. This observation can be explained on the basis of quantum theory. However, classical mechanics cannot predict it accurately. More so, if you look at the atomic spectra of hydrogen, when the emission spectra of hydrogen was observed, it was found to be a line spectra with a large number of lines at different wavelengths or wave numbers. It means that the emission of energy from a hydrogen atom is not taking place in a continuous as expected by classical mechanics. The line spectra is due to de-excitation of electrons from various energy levels. That means the energy is quantized and hence we get discontinuous line spectra instead of continuous band spectra. Classical mechanics failed to explain this phenomena as well. And majorly this was considered to be the beginning of quantum mechanics. So friends, basically these limitations are the origins of quantum mechanics. In order to overcome the limitations of classical mechanics, the concept of atomic structure came in. Initially, Max Planck assumed that the radiation consists of small packets of energy. It means that light has particle-like nature. However, de Broglie put forward an entirely new concept of dual nature of matter. He showed that the matter consists of particles as well as waves associated with it. On the factual grounds, we observe classical mechanics deals with the macroscopic particles while quantum mechanics deals with the microscopic particles. Secondly, classical mechanics is based on Newton's law of motion while quantum mechanics is based on de Broglie's concept and Planck's quantum theory. Moreover, classical mechanics is based on assumption that energy can be absorbed or emitted continuously while quantum mechanics believes that energy transition takes place in a discrete quantas. Also, the velocity of macroscopic particle is much less than velocity of light, and so one can determine the position and velocity with large certainty. Thus, classical mechanics does not require the concept of probability. But quantum mechanics is applicable to microscopic particles moving with high velocities. Hence, Heisenberg uncertainty principle plays important role, and so approach is based on probability. Now, if you see the Bohr's model of atom, Niels Bohr in 1930 proposed a theory of hydrogen atom which not only explained the origin of hydrogen spectrum but also led to an entirely new concept of atomic structure. Although Bohr's atom could successfully explain the hydrogen spectrum, but it failed in explaining the multi-electron systems and superfine splitting of spectrum line when observed under a spectroscope. It does not explain the Stark effect and Zeeman effect under electric and magnetic field respectively. Bohr's model assumes the quantization of angular momentum and suggests that the angular momentum is integral multiple of h upon 2 pi or h cut. But it does not give any logical reasoning for this quantization. For this, Louis de Broglie in 1924 proposed that all the particles are associated with wave and hence a particle has a dual nature. It can be understood using a double slit experiment. You can see in the figure in inset that a beam of light, when it is passed through a single slit, it forms a single band on the screen. However, when the same light with same intensity is allowed to pass through two slits, they interfere and they form the interference pattern on the screen. And basically, this is the interpretation of de Broglie's proposal that particle has dual nature of particle and wave. There was another important concept known as Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Calculations based on Bohr model can be carried out only if the position and velocity of an electron are accurately known. In 1927, Heisenberg showed that there is a fundamental limit to the accuracy with which certain physical measurements may be made simultaneously. This limitation applies to many combinations of dynamical variables such as position, time, energy, velocity, angular momentum, etc. Consequently, it is not possible to take the account of trajectory of an electron. On the basis of this, Heisenberg put forward a principle which is known as uncertainty principle, which says it is not possible to measure simultaneously both the position and momentum or velocity of a small moving particle with absolute accuracy or certainty, which mathematically says like delta x into delta p is always greater than or equal to h upon 4 pi, where delta x is uncertainty in position, delta p is uncertainty in momentum, and h is the Planck's constant. After this, let us come to the very fundamental part of quantum mechanics on which the whole construction of quantum mechanics goes. These are known as postulates of quantum mechanics. We call it as foundation. So the foundation of quantum mechanics were established during the first decade of 20th century. There were many stalwarts whose dedicated and consistent efforts could lead to some common principles we call as postulates. To name a few, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Max Planck, Louis de Broglie, Albert Einstein, Erwin Schrödinger, Max Born, John von Neumann, Paul Dirac, Wolfgang Pauli, and many others. They have put all their efforts in defining and postulating the laws and nature of quantum mechanical behavior. The entire quantum mechanics has following 5 postulates as foundation pillars. The first postulate says, for every independent state of a system, a function of position and time, that is psi of r and t, can be written, which describes the state of the system completely. The statement of each postulate usually will be followed by comments, so that the significance of words within the postulate will be explained right there. The physical significance of psi has been established by Max Born, who suggested that psi represents the amplitude of the wave associated with a matter particle like electron. However, in case of light or sound, square of amplitude gives intensity. Similarly, the square of amplitude of electron wave, that is psi square, gives the intensity of electron wave at that point. In other words, psi square represents the probability density of an electron cloud at any point. It is also called as probability of finding an electron at that point. Further, the value of psi may be real or imaginary, but probability cannot be taken as imaginary. Hence, for complex function, psi into psi complex conjugate is taken as probability instead of psi square. This is always a real positive number, where as we know that psi star, which we represent here, is the complex conjugate of psi. This psi has got very particular property, that is, this wave function psi, which is a function of position and time, is always a single value. It is always a finite one. That means it should not go infinite, and this is always continuous. We cannot take it as discontinuous property, and this is basically one of the reasons why we do not call it as energy density. Instead, we call it as probability density. There are certain other properties associated with the wave function. It is very necessary to know the properties of wave function. What we call it as normalized wave function, and what is the significance? So, the probability of finding a particle like electron in a small volume element d tau, that is, this d tau is equal to dx into dy into dz in terms of Cartesian coordinate, is given by psi into psi conjugate d tau. Of course, you need to take its integral. The probability of finding that particle over the entire space is given by integrating this value between the limits from minus infinity to plus infinity. This integration should come out to be 1. If this condition is fulfilled by the wave function, it is called as normalized wave function. In most of the cases, the value is not equal to 1, but it is equal to n. In that case, if you see this particular part, 1 upon n has to multiply, and the 1 upon square root of n into psi is called as normalized wave function, and 1 upon square root of n is called as normalization factor. The second most important property is orthogonality of wave function. And what are orthogonal wave functions? So if for a given wave function or for a given wave equation, there are two solutions given by normalized wave function psi m and psi n, then they are said to be orthogonal wave function if we find that integral from minus infinity to plus infinity psi m into psi n complex conjugate over the d tau volume element is equal to 0, or if we find the integral of minus infinity to plus infinity psi m complex conjugate into psi n d tau is equal to 0. If two wave functions are normalized as well as orthogonal, they are said to be orthonormal wave functions. They satisfy both the conditions. Let us move towards the second postulate of quantum mechanics. What does second postulate says? It says to each observable quantity in classical mechanics like position, velocity, momentum, energy, etc., there exists a mathematical operator in quantum mechanics. If you see this table, we have mentioned the properties. In front of their properties, the second column contains the classical variables which usually we represent in classical mechanics, and the corresponding quantum mechanical operator is given in the third column. For example, if you see for position in classical mechanics, we represent x position. So in quantum mechanical operator, x into dot position, which represents the quantum mechanical operator. In the similar fashion, momentum into x direction is represented as px, whereas in quantum mechanical operator form, it represents as px cap, because you can see there is a cap on the operator px since it is moving in x direction, which is equal to minus of h upon 2 pi or h cut into del x. If you try to find out the momentum in overall direction, so it is given by p or p cap in quantum mechanical operator, and is given by minus I h upon 2 pi into del, whereas this del comprises of the vector quantity, that is I into del x plus j into del y plus k into del z. If you see at kinetic energy component in x direction, it gives as tx cap, and which is given by minus h square upon 8 pi square m del 2 upon del x square. And if you try to find out the total component of kinetic energy, that is t cap, the total cap is equal to minus h square upon 8 pi square m into Laplacian operator square. That is del square is the Laplacian operator square, which is called as del 2 upon del x square plus del 2 upon del y square plus del 2 upon del z square. And the total energy, which we call it as a Hamiltonian, is given by h cap, which is given by minus h square upon 8 pi square m del square plus v, where v is the potential energy. Now, it is very important to understand the algebra of operators. These operators are tools for transforming function into another one. As such, they have no physical significance if written alone. For example, if you see the square root symbol, and if you do not put anything under this square root symbol, it does not signify anything. It has no sense in writing square root without a quantity. Similarly, if I write down the derivative quantity ddx, and if I do not allow the function to operate on it, so it's of no use, and therefore these are the operators. Without the function, they have no significance as such, and therefore the algebra of operators is of utmost importance. If you see the addition or subtraction of these operators, you can have the a operator plus a plus minus or b operator into bracket, and if you want to operate it on a function f of x, it gives a operator into f of x plus minus b operator into f of x, which is the natural flow. If you try to see multiplication, again this is the natural flow, operator a into operator b, and both they multiply to f of x, they will give operator a into b into f of x, which correspondingly gives g of x, and therefore a when operates on g of x, it gives final function h of x. Similarly, when you try to see the commutative property, when a series of operations are performed on a function successively, the results depend on the sequence in which the operations are performed. That is, a into b operator a into operator b into f of x, if it is equal to operator b into operator a into f of x, that means the operation of operators, if they does not matter in the sequence in which they are operating, if they are same, then the property is called as commutative property. In case of linear operator, an operator A is said to be the linear if its application on the sum of two functions gives the result which is equal to the sum of the operations on the two functions separately. That is, if operator A operates on f of x plus g of x, it will give a into f of x plus minus a into g of x separately. Now, if you the operators, they operate like earlier also we have seen the operator del and operator del square, which is known as a Laplacian operator, have got meaning if the operator del operates on function f, which is a function of f of x, y, z, then we get the vector coordinates like I into del f by del x plus j into del f by del y plus k into del f by del z. These are the quantities, and del square is equal to that is the Laplacian operators is of the form del 2 upon del x square plus del 2 upon del y square plus del 2 upon del z square, which is operated on the function f. So these functions, they can operate, and these operators, these algebra of operators, we need to know in order to know the mathematics in quantum mechanics. There are certain quantum mechanical operators. As we have seen the algebra of operators of classical mechanics, we need to see how the classic quantum mechanical operators they operate. The kinetic, potential and the total energy are derived from the coordinates of momentum and position. But how is the momentum operator derived? That one has to see. Let us assume an electron wave which comes in a usual manner, isn't it? Now, for this particular wave, if you have the equation of say psi is equal to a into e to the power plus minus 2 pi I x upon lambda, which is the usual form of wave, and if you try to find out the differential of this wave in x propagation direction, I simply get this differential equation, differential form after differential, and I get to know this form, that is plus minus 2 pi I upon lambda into I into psi. So this particular part plus minus 2 pi I into psi, if you see this multiplying factor to psi has come out. Now de Broglie has given us a definition of lambda is equal to h upon px. If I substitute this value of lambda in the above equation, I get d psi by dx is equal to plus minus 2 pi upon h into px into I into psi. That means I can rearrange the same equation in the form of px into psi is equal to plus minus h upon 2 pi into I into del psi by del x, which implies that this momentum operator is nothing but px is equal to minus of h upon 2 pi into del x. The operator in the forward x direction will have positive sign. The operator in the negative x direction will have the negative sign. That is what is the momentum operator. If you try to see the Hamiltonian operator, the operator corresponding to the total energy of a system written as the sum of kinetic and potential energy is called as Hamiltonian operator. That is H over cap. So H cap, that is Hamiltonian operator, is given by P square upon 2m plus potential energy, which is a function of position x, y, z. If you try to substitute the all components of momentum, that is px square plus py square plus pz square into it, and if you try to solve it, since we know that the value of px just now we have solved in this manner, I get this Hamiltonian operator in the form minus of h square upon 8 pi square m into del square plus v, that is potential energy, where this m is the mass and del square is the Laplace operator. The next operator we need to see is the angular momentum operator. The angular momentum operator is very important in quantum mechanics, because in quantum mechanics the angular motion is of great importance. In classical mechanics, majority of the macroscopic things, they may not move in angular motion, and their majority of the properties can be determined with their linear motion. However, in quantum mechanics, since all the microscopic particles, they follow the angular part of motion, and therefore angular momentum gains the wide importance in quantum mechanics. The angular momentum L is a very important physical quantity for rotating systems that way. It is given by the vector product of position r and linear momentum p. If you try to look at it from the classical mechanics point of view, this p is mass into velocity, which is a vector quantity, and this angular momentum L is I into omega, which is the moment of inertia and frequency. So moment of inertia is given by m r square, and this frequency is velocity upon radius, and therefore if you try to solve this, I get L is equal to cross product of position and momentum. And therefore, if this I, j and k are the unit vectors and x, y, z are coordinate respectively, then we get this position coordinate I as ix plus jy plus kz and momentum coordinate ipx plus jpy plus kpz. I get the angular momentum part, and the cross product of this follows the usual mechanics, wherein we know that I cross I is 0, I cross j is k, I cross k is minus j, and so on. If you try to solve this cross product, I get the form of angular momentum vector product as I into bracket y minus pz minus zpy plus j into zpx minus xpz plus k into xpy minus ypx. Now, if you compare the components of unit vectors I, j and k, I get to know the components of angular momentum along x-axis, component of angular momentum along y-axis, and component of angular momentum along z-axis. In that sense, if you try to see, this angular momentum is equal to y into pz minus z into py. Angular momentum along y component is z into px minus x into pz, and angular momentum along z axis is x into py minus y into px. If you substitute the values of these momentum along their corresponding axis, I get to know the value of angular momentum along the respective axis. The next important postulate of quantum mechanics is the third postulate, which discusses about the eigenvalue and eigenfunction. It says, if psi is well-behaved wave function and is a suitable operator for the observable quantity or property, then the operation on psi by the operator gives psi multiplied by a constant value of the observable property. It says operator A, when operates on psi, it gives back the function psi multiplied by a constant value, say small a. Now, such function is called as eigenfunction, and the constant multiplied is called as eigenvalue of the operator. This equation is called as eigenequation. Now, here it is very important to note that the word eigen has the German origin, which means it's a proper value, or it's a proper equation, or it's a proper function. Since in quantum mechanics, we are not very sure about the wave function, that how much it is or how big it is, and therefore its wave function or wave equation or eigenvalue or its value should be equivalent to, and therefore the word eigen from the German origin has came into existence. Now, if you look at this eigenequation, this operator A when operates on psi, and when we get back the same function psi multiplied by a constant A, the function psi under such condition is known as eigenfunction. The constant value which multiplies the wave function is known as eigenvalue, and the equation as a whole is known as eigenequation. For example, if you find that ddx is an operator which operates on e to the power 5x, so on operation on e to the power 5x, we get this function e to the power 5x back multiplied by a constant 5. Therefore, this function e to the power 5x is the eigenfunction, the value 5 is the eigenvalue, and this equation as a whole is known as eigenequation. Similarly, If you look at the second equation or second example, wherein if I operate this operator ddx on sin x, I get the result as cos x. That means I do not get back the original function, and therefore this sin x is not the eigenfunction of the operator ddx, and therefore this equation is not the eigen equation. The next important property is Hermitian property of operators. If an operator A has two eigenfunctions, psi and phi, and if I write it in this fashion, say integral of psi into bracket operator A operating on phi first into d tau, and if it is equal to integral wherein the operator A has operated on psi first and then multiplied by phi into d tau, if both of them they are equal, then this operator is called as Hermitian operator, and the property as a whole is called as Hermitian property. Or whenever we have the psi and phi, both of them they are real, or they are complex, they are not real. So in that case, we can have this kind of equation, that integral psi star into a star phi is equal to d tau, or integral of operator operates on psi and then taken complex conjugate multiplied by phi d tau. If both of them they are equal, the property is called as Hermitian property, and the operators are called as Hermitian operator. In this case, this operator A is called as Hermitian operator. So these Hermitian operators are of lot of importance in quantum mechanics, because in quantum mechanics many a times we come across the functions which are complex in nature, and their sequence of multiplication matters. There are two very important properties of Hermitian operators which we very frequently use in quantum mechanical operations. These properties are, number one, the eigenvalues corresponding to eigenfunctions and Hermitian operators are always real. What I mean is, if I obtain the eigenvalue as A in one case and eigenvalue as A star in other case, both of them they must be equal. Since the eigenvalues should always be real, it cannot take the complex values. It should always be real. It has to compare with energy. Energy cannot be complex, and therefore this A has to be equal to A complex conjugate, and this A is called as eigenvalue. And the second property, Hermitian operator property, which is very important again, is eigenfunctions corresponding to different eigenvalues are orthogonal to each other, which means if I have one eigenfunction psi1 which corresponds to some different eigenvalue, and psi2 star which is a complex conjugate of some other eigenvalue, and if I take integral of psi1 and psi2 star, that is psi2 complex conjugate d tau, this is equal to 0. The next postulate is postulate 4. It says that if a number of measurements are made over the configuration space, then the average value of the quantity m is given by m bar. This m bar is given as integral of psi star operator m into psi d tau upon integral psi into psi star d tau. It can be represented as integral psi star operator m into psi d tau if psi is normalized, since in that case integral of psi into psi star d tau has to be equal to 1. In this case, the expected value or average value of physical quantity of system can be determined. But for which functions? For only those functions whose state function is psi, and it is obtained using this equation. For example, we can calculate the expected value of energy if we know precisely the wave function for a system. If I have a wave, and if I can define the wave function psi, and if I define this wave function psi very precisely, I can find out the energy of this wave or particle inside a given defined confined area. The fifth and the last postulate of quantum mechanics deals with the Schrodinger wave equation. What does it say? It gives us an idea about the time-dependent Schrodinger equation. It says that for every system, time-dependent Schrodinger equation is given as this equation. That is, operate Hamiltonian into psi of xt, that is position and time, is equal to I into h cut into del del t of psi, which is again a function of x and t. This equation is a partial differential containing both the dependent variable, that is position and time. One can very easily separate these variables by using the method of separation of variable, that is a usual method. That is, one containing position variable and other with the time variable. After following the separation of variable, we get two equations. Those equations are, the first one is this, wherein you can see the position dependent equation, and this is time dependent independent form of Schrodinger equation, and the other one is position independent and which is called as time dependent form of Schrodinger wave equation. So this is one of the important aspect which Schrodinger has given, and which was I guess is a turning point from where the quantum mechanics has really started taking a swing into all the electronic media. Now, after looking at the 5 postulates of quantum mechanics, we now see the derivation of Schrodinger wave equation. For this, let us consider a very basic elementary system wherein we consider a single electron whose mass is m and whose velocity is v. The total energy of this electron is actually the sum of kinetic energy and potential energy v. This E is equal to actually the Hamiltonian in quantum mechanics, which we take it as a T plus V. We know that in classical mechanics, we take kinetic energy as half mv square being classical motion. It can be represented as p square upon 2m. Now, if I consider the momentum across the three Cartesian axes, it gives the value as p square is equal to px square plus py square plus pz square. If I substitute the values of momentum in kinetic energy expression, I get this expression wherein I have the kinetic energy expression is equal to px square plus py square plus pz square upon 2m. If I want to find out the value for Hamiltonian or total energy, I get the equation E is equal to px square plus py square plus pz square upon 2m plus v as potential energy, which is the function of position. Now, from the expression of momentum, I can find out the value of px square, that is along the x direction only, which gives px square is equal to minus h square upon 4y square del 2 upon del x square, and where my energy is equal to Hamiltonian operator of the energy. And therefore, if I substitute the value of this momentum operator in all the direction of Cartesian coordinate, my Hamiltonian takes the form of h is equal to 1 upon 2m into bracket minus h square upon 4 pi square del 2 upon del x square plus minus h square upon 4 pi square del 2 upon del y square minus h square upon 4 pi square del 2 upon del z square plus potential energy v, which further takes a form wherein I can take out the common part minus h square upon 8 pi square, and inside the bracket it remains del 2 upon del x square plus del 2 upon del y square plus del 2 upon del z square, which is nothing but the Laplacian operator plus the potential energy part. And therefore, the final form of Hamiltonian, which comes out as h is equal to minus h square upon 8 pi square m del square plus potential energy v, which is a function of x, y, z, where del square is equal to del 2 upon del x square plus del 2 upon del y square plus del 2 upon del z square. After knowing this, we also know this equation of eigenequation form, that is Hamiltonian operated over psi will give you some constant, let us assume it as energy E into psi, and therefore I can rearrange it like h psi minus E psi is equal to 0. And if I substitute the Hamiltonian which we have just now obtained in this form and we operate it over psi, I get this equation. On solving and rearranging, I get this equation, that is del square psi plus 8 pi square m upon h square into E minus v into psi is equal to v. This is the most common form of Schrodinger wave equation. And if I try to write it down in the elaborated manner, I get this form, that is del 2 psi upon del x square along x-axis plus del 2 psi upon del y square along y-axis plus del 2 psi upon del z square upon z-axis plus 8 pi square m upon h square into E minus V into psi is equal to 0. This is the most common form of Schrodinger wave equation. The Schrodinger equation thus obtained has got many applications, right from calculating the energy of a simple system to multi-electronic system. For now, let us consider this single electron system or single particle system in a box. Let us assume that a particle of mass m is moving in a one-dimensional box. Let us assume that the length of the box is a, and let us also assume that the potential outside the box is infinity and potential inside the box is 0. If you consider these conditions, I can write down the Schrodinger wave equation of the fashion d2 psi upon dx square plus 8 pi square m upon h square into E minus V psi is equal to 0. If we have potential outside the box infinity, and if we put the condition outside the box, look at figure A here, we can neglect the second term in the equation and therefore simply psi comes out to be 0. What does it indicate? It simply indicates that outside the box there is no probability of finding the particle, since the potential outside the box is infinity, and therefore Schrodinger wave equation gives us a clear-cut answer that there is no probability of finding a particle outside the box. However, if we consider the particle inside the box, the potential energy is 0, and therefore the Schrodinger equation can now be written as this d2 psi upon dx square plus 8 pi square me upon h square into psi is equal to 0. I can very easily go for solution. If I rearrange this, I get 8 pi square me upon h square is equal to constant, and let us assume this constant as k square, which implies that the value of E can be calculated using this formula k square into h square upon 8 pi square m, which we will be using at later stage to reach to one very important conclusion. If I substitute this 8 pi square me upon h square as a constant, which is k square, the second order differential equation takes the form of d2 psi upon dx square plus k square into psi is equal to 0. This equation is that kind of simple harmonic motion, and it has got a very simple solution. So if I try to find out the solution of this harmonic oscillator kind of equation, second order differential equation, I can have two solutions for it. The one is of the form psi is equal to a into e to the power I kx. However, let us not go for the complex solution. Let us go for the simplest possible solution, that is psi is equal to a into sine kx plus b into cos kx. This is the most simplest kind of solution which we have now. Now, let us try to find out what are the values for a, b and k. Unless we find out the values for a, b and k, we would not be able to reach to concrete solution for our wave equation. And therefore, in order to find out the values for constant a, b and k, let us apply the boundary conditions to our problem. That is, if you refer to figure A previously, at x is equal to 0, obviously psi is equal to 0. That is, at the boundary, there is no probability of finding your particle. And therefore, after substituting this value at x is equal to 0, psi is equal to 0, our equation turns out to be that 0 is equal to a into sine of 0 plus b into cos of 0, which leads to final condition that b is ultimately going to be 0, since the overall equation has to be 0. And therefore, our psi turns out to be psi is equal to a into sine of kx. Now our overall wave equation psi is equal to a sine kx plus b cos kx has remained into only form that psi is equal to a sine kx. The other part has automatically gone away. So now let us try to further solve it in order to find out the value of a and k. For this, let us put the other boundary condition that at x is equal to a, again psi is equal to 0, because that is also a boundary condition. And therefore, our equation turns out to be 0 is equal to a into sine k. Now, in order to get this a into sine k is equal to 0, there are two possibilities. One in which a is equal to 0, or sine of k is equal to 0. Since a cannot be 0, because if a and b both are 0, then there is no point of view in discussing the equation of psi, and therefore sine of ka must be 0. However, when sine of ka is equal to 0, if the k satisfies the condition that k is equal to n pi upon a, and therefore under that condition only sine of ka can be equal to 0, and therefore k is equal to n pi upon a. So now we have reached a very important conclusion that our k has got value of n pi upon a, where remember a is the dimension of your box in which the particle is moving, which implies that our psi has got solution of the form that psi is equal to a sine n pi upon a into x. Moreover, if you recall that our energy equation which we have seen earlier is equal to k square h square upon 8 pi square m. Now if I substitute the value of k into this equation, I get E is equal to n square h square upon 8 ms square. Now in the final expression of energy which we have seen, h, m and a are the constants. Therefore, there can only a discrete set of values of energy dictated only for the integer n. That is, energy is quantized. I repeat, energy is quantized and integer n is the quantum number. Moreover, since this situation is in contrast with the situation of free particle, the universal conclusion is that whenever a particle is confined to move in a limited space, its energy is quantized, which is a very vital statement which has come out of the first most ever application of the Schrodinger equation, and it has given the origin of principal quantum number, wherein we have come to know that energy is quantized, and the most concrete conclusion is that whenever a particle is confined to move in a limited space, its energy is quantized. So now, even after finding out the value of k, our wave function is still not complete, because we still did not find the value for a. Now, in order to find the value for a, we need to go for normalization of the wave function. Now, how to normalize and why to normalize? Now, we know that there is a definite probability of finding our particle inside the box. So, the entire probability when it is inside the box, I can now integrate the entire space of the box right from 0 to a, that is its edge length, for psi into psi conjugate into theta, which is equal to 1, which implies if I substitute the value of psi and psi conjugate, I get integral 0 to a square into sine square n pi upon a into x theta is equal to 1. After solving it mathematically and after using the table of standard integral, we need to use the formula sin x is equal to 1 minus cos 2x. And after doing a simple mathematical rearrangements and manipulations, we come to the result that a is equal to square root of 2 upon a. That means it has given us a value of the amplitude a of the wave function, which is square root of 2 upon a. On substituting this value of a into wave function, we get the final form of our wave function, that is psi is equal to square root 2 upon a into sine of n pi x upon a. Now our job remains whether this psi gives us the probable distribution over the entire edge length of the box. Now, before going to find out the validity of psi, the very important point that one needs to know is 0 point energy. What is 0 point energy? We have seen earlier that The particle, whenever it is confined to move in the limited space, its energy is quantized. That is, E is equal to n square h square upon 8 m square, where the n is the principal quantum number. Now, since this n has the value of integer, the energy values can have a different status corresponding to the quantum number. As for n is equal to 1, you have E is equal to h square upon 8 m square. For n is equal to 2, you have E is equal to 4h square upon 8 ms square. For n is equal to 3, E is equal to 9h square upon 8 ms square. Out of all these, if you see and if you try to find out the value for psi, you get the value for psi is square root of 2 upon a into sine of n pi x upon a. If you substitute the value of n is equal to 1, you get the minimum possible energy even at the minimum of the temperature. That is, the minimum energy corresponds to n is equal to 1, because if you substitute n is equal to 0, you do not have the significance of wave function, and therefore the minimum energy corresponding to any quantum number is n is equal to 1, and that minimum energy every particle will have even at absolute zero of temperature. Now, according to equation of energy of particle in one-dimensional box, since the energy is given by n square h square upon 8 ms square, the value of n starts from n is equal to 1, obviously, because n is equal to 0 does not have any significance. For this, the minimum energy associated with the particle is given by E is equal to, now since n is equal to 1, h square upon 8 ms square. This E is equal to h square upon 8 ms square is called the 0 point energy. This energy is associated with the particle even at absolute zero of temperature. It means that the particle is not at rest even at 0K. This being so, the position of particle is uncertain as per the validity of Heisenberg uncertainty principle even at 0K. Also, as expected value and not the exact value of energy is known, the linear momentum is also uncertain. Thus, the 0 point energy implies the uncertainty in the position as well as linear momentum. Now, it is interesting to see if we plot the graphs of psi as a function of position x, that is, to know the validity of psi. Now, for n is equal to 1, we have got psi 1 is equal to square root of 2 upon a sine of pi x upon a, that is 0 point energy. For n is equal to 2, we have got this formula. For n is equal to 3, you have got this formula. Now, if you substitute the value right from figure B, C, D, this value becomes 0 at x is equal to 0 and x is equal to a. If you look at figure B, at the boundary conditions, the value of psi becomes 0, and in between it varies. As we can see, it is maximum at exactly x is equal to a by 2. That is, at the middle, it has a maximum value. Thus, the probability of psi square is maximum at x is equal to a by 2. That is, at the middle. It means that the particle is most likely to be found out at the center of the box if it is in the ground state 1, or if it is a ground state, that is n is equal to 1. This value becomes 0 at x is equal to 0, at x is equal to a by 2, and again at x is equal to a if you substitute n is equal to 2. For n is equal to 2 case, it is maximum at x is equal to a by 4 and minimum at x is equal to 3a by 4, that is negative value. The probability psi square is maximum at x is equal to a by 4 and x is equal to 3a by 4. It means that the particle is most likely to be found at the centers of the two halves if it is in the first excited state, that is n is equal to 2. The point of zero probability at x is equal to a by 2 is called as node. This value becomes 0 at x is equal to 0, at x is equal to a by 3, at x is equal to 2a by 3, and at x is equal to a if we go for further higher state, that is n is equal to 3. So it has two nodes in case of n is equal to 3. Various wave functions and probability distribution curves are shown in the figures of D, C, D, E and F. The number of nodes in any given state is given by n minus 1. It can be seen that if an imaginary plane is passed through the center of the box, the wave function psi1 is symmetrical about the plane. Now psi2 is antisymmetric about the plane. If you see n is equal to 2, it is antisymmetric, and for n is equal to 1 and n is equal to 3, it is symmetric. In a similar manner, all the odd waves functions are symmetrical while even wave functions are antisymmetric. Similarly, if the particle is set free by removing all barriers of potential, well, the energy of particle becomes E is equal to k square h square upon 8 pi square m, because there is no boundary and therefore it does not have limited scope of moving in the confined space. And since k is not quantized in this case because it is not limited, the energy is not quantized. Hence, a free particle can have continuous values of energy, and this is known as non-quantization of energy. So now let us extend the application of Schrodinger equation to particle in three-dimensional box. Now herein, let us consider a particle of mass m in a three-dimensional rectangular box of edge length a, b and c along the three Cartesian coordinate axes x, y and z respectively. The potential energy of a particle inside the box as usual is 0, while outside the box it is considered as infinity. Now, the Schrodinger wave equation inside the box is given by the equation which is given at the top. Herein, we can see the potential energy inside the box V is equal to 0, and therefore this equation reduces to the equation below, wherein we have got minus h square upon 8 pi square m into Laplacian operator psi is equal to E psi, where our psi is a function of x, y and z along all the three coordinate axes. However, it is very difficult to solve this equation. Why? Because all the three coordinate axes are involved into this equation, and the motion of particle along the three axes are simultaneously involved, and therefore it is very difficult to solve this equation. Now, to solve this equation, we need to use the method of separation of variable. Therefore, let us assume that our wave function psi of xyz can be written as x along x component, y along y component and z along z component. That is, psi of xyz is equal to capital X into capital Y into capital Z. This way, we can split the overall is one equation of Schrodinger eigenvalue equation into three equations, in which we can have a solution of Schrodinger wave equation along the three Cartesian coordinates independently, and then for the sake of solving the equations, we can combine after we get solution along each individual direction. So now, after splitting the three coordinate equation along the three coordinate axes, we have got the equations, three corresponding equations along the three coordinate axes. That is, if you see this h square upon 8 pi square m into del 2x upon del x square, then into 1 upon x is equal to ax. Then second part in this fashion, that is along y-axis, and the third part that is along z-axis. So all the three parts along the respective coordinate axes have been splitted. Now our task is to find out the independent solutions of these three second order differential equations. So for solving this, the solution to individual equations can be as we have found out in a one dimensional box, that x is equal to square root of 2 upon a into sine of nx pi upon x into x. Similarly, in case of y, we have got the solution, and in case of z, we have got this solution. Now, in this case, you can see that there are generation of three quantum numbers now, nx, ny, and nz, for the three separate boxes, imaginary boxes, wherein we have one box along x-axis, other box along y-axis, and the third box along z-axis. So now the overall wave function psi of xyz, if we try to combine as usual, that it is x, the product of x into y into z. So if we try to combine the solutions of individual solutions of x, y, and z, I come to have this expression, overall expression, wherein I get the combined wave equation of this form: square root of 8 upon abc into sine of nx pi x upon a into sine of ny pi y upon b into sine of nz pi z upon c. Also, if I try to find out the energy solutions along x, along y, and along z, are these three. That is, along x it is Ex is equal to nx square h square upon 8m square. Along y it is ny square h square upon 8mb square. And along z it is nz square h square upon 8mc square. Such that the total energy also, it will be along distributed in a three part. That is h square upon 8m into bracket nx square upon a square plus ny square upon b square plus nz square upon c square. So this is what is about three-dimensional. That means the lowest ground state energy, if I try to find out for this particular system, and if I substitute nx is equal to 1, ny is equal to 1, and nz is equal to 1, so in that case, the lowest possible energy for a particle in a three-dimensional box will come out to be h square upon 8m into 1 upon a square plus 1 upon b square plus 1 upon c square for a rectangular box. That is, the total energy and the wave function for a three-dimensional box requires three quantum numbers to be described for the state of the system, for defining the state of the system. Now, similarly, if I generalize the case for two-dimensional problem, only two quantum numbers will be described. And as we have seen, for one-dimensional box, we need one quantum number to be described. Accordingly, the equation has been given here that E is equal to Ex plus Ey. If the box is two-dimensional, I need only two quantum numbers to describe the state of the. Now, when I extend this case to a cubical box case, the further interesting situation arises. Now, why I say interesting case? Because in case of cubical box, all the edges of the box are same, and hence the energy expression reduces to equation number 1. That is, all the edges A, B, and C are equal, and therefore energy E is equal to h square upon 8m square into nx square plus ny square plus nz square. Now, when the first principal quantum number is in the lowest energy state, the energy expression takes the form of equation number 2. Why it takes the form of equation number 2? Because I have substituted the value of nx is equal to 1, ny is equal to 1, and nz is equal to 1. Therefore, energy E11 comes out to be 3h square upon 8m square. That is given by equation number 2. This value is 3 times that of the one-dimensional box, which is very obvious. And the corresponding wave function is given by equation number 3, wherein I have psi 111 is equal to square root of 8 upon a cube into sine of pi x upon a, sine of pi y upon a, and sine of pi z upon a, since all the lengths are same. Now, the next energy level reaches when one of the quantum number is 2 and the other two are 1 each. Under these circumstances, the three possible ways of representation are observed, which are corresponding to nx, ny, and nz, that is either 211 or 121 or 112. Each state has the same energy, and which is represented in equation number 4. However, if I try to find out their wave functions, they will be different. In one case wherein I have psi 211, I have expression of wave function as this. In other case, psi of 121, I have a expression as this. And in case of psi 122, I have expression like this. That means Such a state having more than one wave function are called as degenerate state, and the phenomena is called degeneracy. In this case, the state is triply degenerated, and in case of nx is equal to ny is equal to nz is equal to 1, that means all the quantum numbers are equal to 1, the states are called as non-degenerate state. We can further extend this pictorially. If I try to plot the energy versus the possibilities of wave function, so the ground state energy, that is E111 in case of cubical box, comes out to be 3h square upon 8ms square, wherein all the three quantum numbers are same and therefore they are lying on in only one energy level. However, when I go for second quantum number, wherein one of the quantum number is 1, one of the quantum number is 2 and the other two are 1, the energy corresponds to 6h square upon 8ms square. However, interestingly, if you see, although the energy is same, the wave function has been distributed in the three states, that is 211, 121 and 112 representation, kind of representation. The other similar case can be obtained if I go for two quantum numbers equivalent to 2 and one quantum number equivalent to 1. I get energy is equal to 9h square upon 8ms square, and the degenerates, triply degenerate states are 221, 1212 and 122. I can further go to the higher state wherein all the quantum numbers are same, that is 222, and I have energy is equal to 12h square upon 8ms square, and again I obtain the non-degenerate state wherein I have wave function single wave representation, that is 222. However, the other interesting fact to be noted here, that if I ask you what are the first four energy levels which are to be described under such cubical box degeneracy, so do you agree that these are the only first four energy states which we can obtain? If you say yes, then you are wrong, because the next step we can have is the one quantum number equivalent to 3 equivalent to 3 and two of the quantum numbers are equivalent to 1. This state come out to be energy equivalent to 11h square upon 8ms square and not 12h square upon 8ms square, and therefore the first four quantum energy levels are, that is 3h square upon 8ms square, 6h square upon 8ms square is second, 9h square upon 8ms square is third one, and 11h square upon 8ms square is the actual fourth one. So 12h square upon 8ms square, wherein the non-degenerate state appears again, is the fifth state, not the fourth state. The same thing can be pictorially represented, what actually is meant by degeneracy. So if you look at these figures, you can see that in one of the first figure, if you stand by x side, you will see there are two balls. You can see if you stand by y side, you can see only one ball, and if you stand by z side, you again see only one ball, and therefore the degeneracy stands for 2 1 1. If you go for second figure, you can have the visualization of 1 to 1 kind of situation, and if you go for third figure, you can have the visualization of 1 1 2 kind of figure. So the cubical box degeneracy means in this sense, although the energy of the particles are same, however their degeneracy can be different. They can be triply degenerated, they can be six-fold degenerated, or they can be non-degenerated as well. The best example that I can quote here is, let there be a multi-story apartment wherein there are multiple floors in a building. However, there are multiple flats on the single floor, and therefore we can say, although there are 5 flats on the single floor, these 5 flats have got different degeneracy. That means they are degenerated state, although the energy are same. So this degeneracy concept can be understood in this manner. Here we have come to an end of the lecture 1, in which we have seen the introduction to quantum mechanics. We have seen the postulates. We have seen the application of Schrodinger equation, derivation of Schrodinger equation, application of Schrodinger equation to one-dimensional box, and we have seen its application to a particle in a three-dimensional box. Thank you, friends.